Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Hello, Sleepy Hollow fans, and welcome to my Season 1, Episode 6 review of Sleepy Hollow. Once again, I'd like to thank you guys so much for, understanding my situation with my Miraculous Ladybug review and my Friday the 13th Part 2 review. I'm sorry about that whole situation, but I'm glad, you guys have seen it, and, you guys are enjoying it, so I'm glad, it's still available, and thankfully Internet Archive and Google Drive are good alternative websites to upload this, so those will be my primary options from now on whenever videos, either get blocked and, like Friday the 13th Part 2, if I do another situation like that again where I accidentally cancel the appeal or I just fail, or if it gets removed where I just don't win the situation. But yeah, so last time before those two, update videos, I started my Let's Play of the LEGO Marvel Avengers DLC with the release of Part 1 of my playthrough, so I hope you guys enjoyed that, and you can go check that out if you were interested in it. And based on the reception of that, I will continue it, so thank you for the support on that. And today I'll be covering Season 1, Episode 6 of Sleepy Hollow, which is titled The Sin Eater. Which was released on November 4th, 2013. So the short synopsis of the episode is, when Ichabod Crane goes missing, his wife Katrina appears to Abby Mills in a vision, warning her that the Headless Horseman will return to Sleepy Hollow by nightfall. An anxious Abby seeks help from the mysterious Henry Parrish, who holds vital clues about how Crane can vanquish his dangerous blood tie to the Headless Horseman. Meanwhile, an encounter from Crane's past weighs heavily on him, and details about his first meeting with Katrina are revealed. So, I'm not sure really how fans feel about this episode, but it's a very packed episode. This very much will be a very story-heavy episode for the arc of this season. But let's take a look at the episode to see whether I think it's a good or bad episode of Sleepy Hollow. The episode begins with Abby and Crane attending a baseball game, and Abby tries to explain to him why she likes the game baseball so much. She tells him it is traditional, the rules are always the same, there's teamwork, and there's no discrimination, which are pretty cool ways, and I actually do love baseball myself with the Red Sox, so I totally get that. Not my favorites of the four, and honestly, I'm more of the Celtics are my favorite. But I still love watching the Red Sox, and seeing baseball in person is very much a fun thing to do. But yeah, after Crane sees Abby, get upset with the umpire about, I assume, like a bad call or, whatever, something like that, he decides he's going to join in on the action and tries to insult the umpire, and Abby tells him that he's, home now, and that he finally gets it. But I think she also tells him that there was really nothing to scream at him about or insult him about. I think Crane even calls him Basket Face, which is fucking hilarious. Pretty funny. And she also says that the present, is his home as well. She even offers to take him to a Mets game one day, though he still doesn't understand any of the things she says about the game. She offers a ride home to him, but he decides to, get a walk since he knows where he lives by now. He knows where he, how to get there, so he decides to take a walk instead. So when they go their separate ways, Crane goes to visit Katrina's grave, only to be shot with a tranquilizer dart and taken captive by mysterious people, which really cool way to open the episode, seeing Crane get kidnapped, which is an interesting concept. On her drive home, Abby goes into something of a trance, randomly while she's driving, and wakes up in a dark house to the sound of a baby crying. And this is fucking creepy. It's a pretty creepy scene of Abby just exploring this house and seeing all these creepy things and shit. Exploring, she finds no baby in the carriage, but a handmade doll. And then the Headless Horseman then comes after and comes out of fucking nowhere. And she runs into witches, one of them being Katrina Crane, who of course is Ichabod's wife. And who explains that this home was like the one she shared with Crane, and the Horseman is a manifestation of the future to come. Katrina tells her that Crane has been abducted and is where Katrina can, and it's to the point where Katrina can no longer see him. She can't contact him for some reason. So she confirms with Abby that he was taken because of his blood tie to the Horseman. And I think this has pretty much been established that that Crane and the Horseman woke up because of their blood tie. And Katrina, tells Abby that she must find the Sin Eater before sunrise so that Crane may be sanctified and separated from the Horseman, and he doesn't have to die, and they can, fight the Horseman together. So after that whole vision, Abby wakes up, still behind the wheel, and she runs off the road when a truck, comes zooming after her, and she takes her concerns to Captain Irving, telling him that the Headless Horseman's going to return, which is no surprise. When he asks her how, she explains to him that Crane's wife is a witch, and the Horseman is linked to Crane, and that they must find him. And Captain Irving, goes on this, saying that he holds on to virginity and skepticism, and, he's still very wary about everything, being, the Christian he is, but also, just, believing it's not possible yet, since he hasn't seen it. But this is what Captain Irving has to say to Abby at the end of their discussion.
I guess you're planning a family reunion.
So with Abby being by herself and needing to find Crane, she decides she needs, like Crane said, Captain Irving says, she needs a second person to help her out. So she's granted a 24-hour furlough for her sister to help her in locating the Sin Eater, which is pretty cool. We get to see Jenny again and have her do more in this episode, considering she didn't get to do anything in the last episode. We haven't seen her since episode 4. And Crane wakes up in a dimly lit room where a man sits down across from him with on a table with a folder. And he explains that he has the true account of Ichabod Crane in his hand. Crane is very angry and so arrogantly demonstrates his prodigious intellect, correctly identifying the man as Mr. Rutledge, a descendant of Edward Rutledge, who is the youngest sinner of the Declaration of Independence and a Mason. Crane claims membership in the fraternity as well, and Rutledge asks him when he first heard the words Ordo ab Chao, meaning Order of Chaos. Order from Chaos, I mean. Sorry if I butcher that pronunciation. And so, we get to see Crane explain where he heard that from in a flashback, which is going to be for a lot of the episodes, so buckle in, guys. So Crane tells him that they were spoken to him by Arthur Bernard long ago. And in the flashback, Arthur Bernard, who is a freed slave who was printing pamphlets in favor of the American cause, had been detained by British forces. The malign on the Sidious pamphlets was Cicero. But a man named Ben Stray Tarleton, I think that's how you pronounce his name. Well, just say it but his last name is Tarleton. That's all you need to know, basically. Suspected Bernard knew the real name of the author, and Lieutenant Crane was assigned to get the information from Bernard. And a woman claiming to be a Quaker nurse enters and berates Crane about the treatment of the man. And who should so happen to be this Quaker nurse but Katrina? Yes, it's Katrina. And we get to see her and Ichabod's first meeting, just like the short synopsis said. And when Bernard tells her that he says to her that she's fine, he's fine and that he's okay and doesn't need, any medical attention, she studies Crane and tells him that she can see he has a conscience and wants to show Bernard mercy before she leaves. Which, obviously, this goes into Crane questioning, his loyalty to, the crown or his country. And during the interrogation, Crane calls a halt for a moment, and Bernard tells Crane that there are demons all around, and he asks Crane to join him in the fight, but he won't give up a name to stop the beating. So Bernard's pretty relentless. He said he wants Crane to join the cause. He can see the good in him, but he doesn't want to fucking give up the name. He doesn't want to do that because because he supports the cause and is not willing to do it. So Bernard's interrogation lasts for days, basically, and before Crane is called away to stand guard at a public hanging. And there, after the hanging, he makes an objection to Tarleton concerning the hangings, claiming that they really aren't good for morale. And, he points out that a kid had to go see his father die, and this, this may not be a good way to get people on their side. Tarleton warns Crane, though, not to give him cause to doubt his loyalty, and Crane catches sight of the demon beneath Tarleton's skin, which is a pretty cool shot. And he runs in Katrina Van Tassel, and they finally introduce themselves, and she tells him that he's a terrible liar and explains destiny being a choice. So making him understand certain things. And after she speaks with Crane, she realizes that he is a gift, a power to bear witness, and that they need him for their cause. So she really wants him to join their group and the American cause. When he asks who she is, she tells him she's someone who seeks the truth and explains that evil gains strength when good men do nothing. She tells him that he's a good man. So she's basically saying, you don't do something, you're essentially feeding this evil to these evil men. But if you do something, you stand up to this American cause, you can change that. You can take that evil away from them. So, meanwhile, Abby and Jenny are looking through Corbin's old files, trying to find connections between death row inmates and the Sin Eater, and then they find that the last words of all of these people who are on death row to be, "I am sanctified." Jenny realizes that Abby really cares about Crane, and that she isn't, kidding when she wants to find Crane. He's become very important, and Abby really shows that in this episode. And Abby explains how they used to not fit in, and about how Crane doesn't fit in now, and that she can sympathize with that and wants to not lose someone like that, another person like that in her life, and she wants to, make him fit in, make him feel welcome in this new world. Abby then has a revelation about the Sin Eater, and that he hides in the identities of dead inmates. So they find a lead, and and they realize that he's been going under the name of a man named Ian Kellett, who is in Hartford, Connecticut, and they head off to go find him. The occupant of the apartment doesn't want any company, and at the door, Abby tells him that his real name is Henry Parrish and that they need to talk. He explains to them that he doesn't do what they want anymore, but Abby tells him it's a gift he must use, and Jenny tells him that he has a responsibility to help them. Abby explains to him about the Horsemen, and the best he offers is to use the connection between Abby and Crane to help them locate Crane. And when they touch, his eyes turn black, and this is what he says on where they can find Crane.
Friend is underground, behind a door marked with a symbol, a square, and a compass.
But the senator tells him that's all he can do for them, and they leave in search of Crane. So in the cellar, Crane continues his story of Bernard, and Tarleton told him that he has failed to get a confession. So now Crane must take Bernard into the farce and kill him. Crane is appalled, but he has his orders, and basically this is a test of his loyalty. Tarleton wants to see if Crane's being loyal, so he says, go kill the man in the forest, and, and do it, or you're essentially betraying your country. And as they walk, Bernard tells Crane that Katrina was right, but Crane cannot conceive, betraying everything he knows. But Bernard tells him that if he pulls the trigger, he'll have a sin in his heart forever. Ultimately, Crane makes the correct decision and decides he cannot shoot this man, and Bernard tells him to find Katrina and say, Ordo ab chow, the words that he mentioned earlier. She will then take him to Washington, which is General George Washington, in case if you guys are curious. And as Bernard is walking away, he still gets killed and is shot down by Tarleton, who calls Crane a traitor before turning into a demon and attacking him. But Crane he tries to kill him, but he fails and gets attacked. But Crane gets lucky, and the people people scare the demon off. So when Crane awakens, he stumbles out of the forest into Katrina, and he repeats those words, Ordo ab chow. I really am doing bad at this pronunciation. I'm so sorry if I keep stumbling over that, but it's just a really hard word to say. As Bernard had instructed to him, and passes out on the floor. And as the story concludes, Crane tells Rutledge that he couldn't save Arthur Bernard, and it's weighing heavily on him that had he acted sooner, the man could have lived. Finally conceived, Rutledge tells him that they are humbled by his presence and offers Crane the trust of the Freemasons. It's revealed that Katrina wrote the journal that Mr. Rutledge has, and Rutledge tells Crane that Bernard made the ultimate sacrifice, and now Crane must do the same. In killing himself, he will kill the Horsemen, but his brothers will never harm him, so they have another way of doing it, which is giving him poison. So letting him do it. But it's his decision. They're not going to force him, I don't think. At least not that the episode implies. So, and even though Crane didn't shoot him, there's a reason why he's tied to the Horsemen, and that's because of his sin and guilt that he couldn't save Bernard, which is a really cool plot detail, and really cool to see something from Crane's past still haunting him. At the same time, Abby and Jenny find the cellar and prepare to fight their way in, but Crane stops her and tells the people to excuse them for a minute and, just have him and Abby talk one-on-one so that he can speak with her privately. He basically tells her the plan to drink the poison and kill himself, thus killing the Horsemen as well. And this is pretty much what... Abby's horrified by, his explanation and trying to explain to him what Katrina told her about the Sin Eater, but he can't be persuaded otherwise, and he's set on what he wants to do. And this is a really great scene of Abby and Crane, bashing heads. So this is the first time where Crane's like, look, I gotta kill myself. We don't have the time. The Horseman's going to come. If I kill myself now, the Horseman won't have to come, and we can save, and I can make the best good sacrifice. But Abby's trying to, not lose someone else. So she's like, listen, I'll get this guy. He'll separate your blood tie, and you can still live and do it. But he thinks that if he does that, that's not going to solve the problem, and that the Horseman will just continue. And it's a really great scene, seeing these two butt heads, and essentially, it's a very sad scene, and a very emotional scene, and it's probably one of the better scenes of the episode. A really good Abby and Crane scene.
Abby, this is the only way.
It's the first time you ever called me Abby.
I've lived on borrowed time, more than any man deserves. I've seen wonders beyond my wildest imaginings. And through these centuries, against the impossibility that we would find each other, we did. And I am most grateful for it.
How can you be so calm about this?
I'm terrified.
So she takes his hand and sits with him after he drinks the poison, and as the poison starts to take its effect, the Sin Eater arrives and says that Crane doesn't have to die to help save everyone. He realized he can save Crane, and he's happy to help. So the Sin Eater stabs Crane's hand and tastes his blood, getting flashbacks of Crane's life. He has Crane summon Arthur Bernard into the room, and Crane sees Bernard sitting across from him. When Crane apologizes profusely to the man, Bernard explains that his death was Crane's salvation and Crane needs to forgive himself for it. And so accepting this, Bernard/Henry, who is the Sin Eater, has Crane repeat these words in order to be sanctified. And I like the scene, I like the, Crane's sin cleansing scene, because I like that he finally confronts it. Him and Bernard have a one-on-one, and he finally faces his guilt and his sin and gets rid of it, and finally purges that blood tie. It's a really cool way to cap off the episode, and a great individual moment for Crane. Really great moment. One of my definitely another great scene in the episode.
What more would you have done?
Freed you sooner so you'd live.
And if I had, would you have found your destiny? Found your way to your true home?
Your death is on my soul.
No, my death saved your soul. Only you chose to see it as a sin, when all along it was your salvation.
What would you have me do?
Forgive yourself. The Horseman feeds on your regret. That is what fuels your blood tie to him. Let it go, and his hold over you will be broken.
No, I'd only free him so he could ride again.
You'd only free yourself to stop him, and the others that ride with him. But you won't do it alone.
Abby.
Together, your combined power will weather the coming storm. Now do you understand?
I do.
And repeat these words. I purge the wicked from my blood.
I purge the wicked from my blood.
Our spirits severed.
Our spirits severed.
My soul sanctified.
My soul sanctified.
Death, leave me now.
Death, leave me now.
I command you.
I command you.
So Crane's blood on the table separates from itself, and the Sin Eater dunks bread into it and eats it, which is fucking nasty, but I guess he's doing it for a reason, but it's still gross. I did not need to see that. And with the ritual done, Crane realizes he doesn't feel the horseman anymore, and the Sin Eater announces that he has been sanctified. And Abby hugs Crane, and Crane admits that she was right and that there's always another way. And it's a pretty heartwarming and funny scene with and a good way to to cap off the episode. I really like this scene. Another great Abby and Crane scene.
There's always another way.
Next time, listen to me, okay? I can't go through that again.
My ears shall remain eternally open to your admonition.
I don't know what the hell that means. Just say yes.
Yes.
And the episode ends with the sun setting outside, and once again, the Headless Horseman is, of course, coming. So another tease of the Horseman. Just, like, we haven't had enough of those. I mean, I know why they do it. They want to tease the upcoming, finale. But, there's only so many times that can, be a bit annoying. But, yeah, we see the Horseman starts his pursuit against, Crane and the others. And yeah, that's the end of the episode. So let's get into my final thoughts. I'm going to give Season 1, Episode 6 of Sleepy Hollow 2 stars out of 5. Yeah, a below average episode. Especially since considering the last episode was pretty good and, that was a 5 out of 5. Yeah, this one was not a very good one. Not a good episode. But why don't I go into the positives first before I explain my negatives with the episode and what really dragged it down for me. So let's start with the positives. So to start off, I think Crane himself is great in this episode. It's a really good episode for him. I like his story in this episode, and I like the idea that he has to forgive his past sin in order to cut the blood ties with the Horseman, the Headless Horseman. It's really cool seeing more of Crane's past, but also some of his past coming back to haunt him, and that he needs to forgive himself in order to help himself now in the present. And it's a really cool, story for Crane in this episode, and just the setup of Crane being abducted, but it ends up being like people who, his brothers in arms and people, who are helping to fight him for his cause is really cool, and I did like Crane in this episode, and it was fun, and I thought his story was great. The next positive I would say is I liked Abby's story as well in this episode. Abby was great in this episode. She had a good story and how she was worried about Crane and how she wanted to save him and that she understands how it is to be an outsider. Abby was not really the main focus. The episode kind of splits it, but I would say Crane's story took up maybe a bit more than Abby's. But Abby did have a story, and they didn't throw Abby to the side, which is good. And because I was worried that maybe they might throw Crane to the side, and this would be too centric on Abby. But the episode did well on making sure both of them had good plots, good character moments, both individually and together. And I really liked how they were handled in this episode, and Abby was no exception. She did great in this episode. I liked her story. It builds on the last episode of her, really coming to appreciate Crane and not wanting him to die. So it does feel a little bit kind of repetitive that, it's essentially sort of like the end of the last episode, kind of reiterating the point home that she really cares about Crane. But I guess since Jenny's here, and with the stakes maybe a bit more higher, or at least the same level, since Crane is essentially going to die like he did in the last episode, or is willing to kill himself, it makes the episode good because we could see more of that. And it's pretty cool seeing Abby interact with Katrina, and her being the one contacted because Crane is kidnapped, and it drives home their friendship in these episodes. So yeah, I liked how Abby's story was handled. It may have been repetitive in the last, as it might have borrowed some elements from the last episode, reiterating her friendship with Crane. But I think it worked because with Jenny there, it at least provided enough difference compared to the last episode. So, I think it works. And the final positive I have is that both of them together had great chemistry, both in the beginning of the episode and near the end of the episode, especially near the end of the episode. When Crane and Abby finally meet back up, those last 3 scenes of them talking on the table, saying, Abby trying to convince him that there's always a way, and, she wants to doesn't want him to die, and Crane being set and being like, no, I gotta do this, I gotta make the ultimate sacrifice, I can't have the horsemen running loose, I'd rather save you guys than save my own life. And it's really cool. And, them having that little hug scene and, a little bit of a humorous moment, but also, just realizing how much they need each other and how, they understand being outsiders, but they always have each other. Really great stuff. I really enjoyed it, and I definitely think the end of the episode and the beginning show how strong and developed their friendship has become now since episode 1. But now, that's all I have for positives. So now I think it's time we get into the negatives. And I have a couple negatives. So let's just go right into them. So I think my first negative is going to have to be Jenny. Jenny's a great character. I like Jenny. And she was good in the past episode she was in. Or at least in episode 4 when we last saw her. Now in this episode, she was utilized poorly. I'm just going to say that. She was basically like just somebody to, be a placeholder for Crane since he was kidnapped and not there. Didn't feel like she contributed a little bit, but it didn't feel like she was necessarily, I don't know, she just didn't feel like she really belonged in the story yet, or at least not in this one. Maybe it's just because it didn't feel like she contributed much, or it felt like they didn't write enough for her, but I just found Jenny to not really get to do much in the episode, and I honestly find that a shame considering her character is good, and considering how her character develops throughout the entire show. It's a shame that early on, but even episode 4, when her and when it was about her focus with Abby and their them being sisters, that gave good stuff for her in that episode. But in this one, they don't really have that. She's just kind of like a secondary source of information and a secondary helping hand. And while some of her knowledge does come in handy, ultimately it doesn't feel like really she plays a huge role in the episode. It feels like not much she does really affects the episode. And I would have liked to see maybe what the difference is between her and Abby and Jenny working together versus Abby and Crane. And also, just her getting more to do. I just feel like she just had maybe like a couple lines, couple of stuff that she could help out with, but she really didn't figure it out. And it ended up being Abby who was figuring out, who the Sin Eater was. And that's cool for Abby, and I like that, but it also didn't give Jenny much to do. So, yeah, Jenny, unfortunately, didn't get much to do in this episode, and as a character, she was not great in this episode. So hopefully that'll be improved upon in the later episodes. We'll see. Next one would be, and this isn't a huge one, but it is a negative that is worth pointing out. There's a lack of action and humor in the episode. Now, I said in the last episode that I don't necessarily think action and humor have to be there to make the episode strong. If the story is strong enough and there's enough, and if it enhances the story to not really have much action or humor, then that's great. But this episode really could have used it, because it did. Because honestly, no, besides maybe if you want a little bit of humor in the beginning with Abby and Crane, tiny bit of humor, them meeting back up not really any humor anywhere else, and it's a shame because it could have helped the episode a bit more had there been more humor. But I guess because they were separated for the whole episode, they really didn't have that. But still, Abby and Jenny could have had humor, or even Crane could have, had some. But then maybe the humor, but then there's the action, right? There was basically no action besides the flashbacks. No action at all. No fighting, no any hand-to-hand combat or, mental, fights. Nothing like that. Just no action. No action at all. And it kind of doesn't work in this episode. Because unlike the last episode, it doesn't help the story. And I just think that had there been more action and humor, it could have made the episode more balanced and entertaining. It isn't a huge negative, but I think what hurts it overall is that I understand that it would have been hard for the story, but honestly, I would have taken anything. Even if Abby and Jenny were having the humor, I would have taken that. I would have taken even some action with Abby or with Crane. Just something. I just felt like there was nothing there, and it could have been extra little stuff that could have enhanced the episode further. It's not a deal breaker, but it definitely would have made the episode much more entertaining and more well balanced, and less, I would say, slow and dull, because that's kind of what this episode feels like. But I think, and that's really how I can best describe the episode, but I'll maybe say that a bit more in a couple few minutes. But I think we need to get into my final negative, and I think this is the hugest one of all. And this really hurts the episode as a whole. My biggest negative with this episode, my final and biggest negative with this episode, there is no central villain in this episode. No villain. No villain whatsoever. So, you have Crane kidnapped by these people, but they're not the villains. The Freemasons are very much Crane's brothers. They're holding him there for a reason. You think they're the villains, but they're revealed as the being on Crane's side. So it's not the Freemasons. They're not the villains. Headless Horseman can't be the villain because he's barely in it. He's not there. Yes, he has the blood tie, but he's not there physically, and the blood tie doesn't really count as a villain. It's just what the Horseman is feeding off of, but it's not something that could hold an episode. But I guess the episode title is Sin Eater, but the Sin Eater is not a villain either. He actually helps Crane with separating the blood tie. So if you want to stretch it, you could say maybe Tarleton from the past could be considered a villain. But even then, he's a past guy. He's a guy from the past, a flashback. Not really much of a villain. Sure, he's part of Crane's story, but he's not part of the story now. It doesn't work for me. He was maybe a secondary antagonist, maybe a minor threat. But I wouldn't call him the central villain. Not at all. I mean, if you want to dispute that, you can very much go ahead in the comments and dispute that maybe, or you could tell me who the villain of this episode is, because honestly, I don't think there was a villain in this episode, and that's a problem. If you don't have a villain, then that makes the episode pretty dull and boring, because there's no opposing force to the heroes. What are they fighting against? Who's the villain of the week? And I know there's an overall story arc, but the episode should also be helping that story arc, but also be able to be a self-contained story. If there's no individual story, then the episode just feels pointless. It just feels like a stepping stone to another episode, rather than its own thing. You can add stuff for the arc, but you want to also have an individual story then and there. So to me, the lack of a villain is a problem because you have no opposing force for the villains, so you can't have any action. There's no humor because Crane and Abby are practically separated for most of the episode, so that hurts it too. But you could have worked that with Abby and Jenny, or provided moments with Crane. But the humor isn't really the problem, it's the action and the lack of a villain. And that the action not being there is mainly because there's really no villain. And that sucks. So while it's a great episode for Crane and Abby and them together, there's nothing more for them. There's nothing more to the episode that adds to it. Nothing more good. Which is why it's so low. So overall, guys, I would not recommend this episode to fans and newcomers of the show. Like I said, it has its moments, mainly with Crane and, Abby individually and together. But it just feels like an episode that's setting up as being a stepping stone for future episodes, rather than being its own episode, individual episode, with sprinkles of adding to the overall arc, right? It's okay to add to the arc. That's not the problem. The problem is that that's all they do. There's no story here. Nothing for me to come back to. It's just a stepping stone for a future episode. And I just think it sucks. There's no amazing story that stands alone on its own and makes it compelling. So if you're looking for an episode that you can just pop in at any time, this isn't the episode. This feels like an episode that only works if you're watching the episodes in order. But if you just want to pop in a Sleepy Hollow episode, this isn't it. This is just a stepping stone. It has good character stuff for Abby and Crane and them both individually and together, but that's all you're going to get here. And honestly, you could get that plus more in other episodes. So, sorry, but, that's why I just don't recommend it. But you guys can judge for yourself and watch it yourself and see if you agree with me or not. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Please give it a like if you did. Comment down below your thoughts on the episode. Do you like it and think I'm being too harsh with it? Do you enjoy this episode? Do you hate it? You're like me, where you just don't think it's a good episode and it's either below average or is just the worst of the worst and isn't really that great. It only has a few moments of good stuff. Or are you somewhere in the middle where you don't think it's that good, but it's not that bad either, and you just think it's all right? I'm curious for your thoughts, so let me know down in the comment section below. And subscribe for more Sleepy Hollow content like this, or if you're just interested in any of my other content. And you could also follow me on Facebook, where I have discussions about things we talk about on both my channels, and Twitch, where I hope to live stream in the future. But in my next video, I will continue my playthrough of the LEGO Marvel Avengers DLC with, of course, part 2, and that will be with Doctor Strange, the Doctor Strange level. I will be working on my future projects in between, so that could be maybe a week or two from now, who knows, but we'll see. But that will be what you can expect next. But I want to thank you guys so much for watching my review, and hopefully maybe I'll get another episode review out of Sleepy Hollow out this month. And yeah, that's all I gotta say. Not really much to say about this episode, just a very below average episode that just doesn't have much going for it. But thanks for watching, and as always, peace out.